Welcome back to episode 10 of the Social Media Millionaire podcast. This episode, we're going to cover the psychology behind our $500,000 launch and the tips and tricks that you can use to maximize your sales every single month in your business.
So, in this episode, we're going to unpack some of the strategy behind what facilitated this big launch and just what we do in our business every single month to generate the sales and interest that we do, and give you some kind of actionable strategies that you can bring into your business, whether you do a launch model or you do evergreen. I want to preface this by saying that we generally do evergreen. We occasionally will do a launch if we're launching a new product or if we're offering like a bonus or something, then we'll go full on launch style, but for specific things. But generally, we just go evergreen. So that's kind of our vibe. I don't like the pressure that comes with the launch style. I think a lot of people can resonate with that.
Yeah, and it puts pressure on like two sides, like one internally in your company, or if it's just you in the beginning, and then it also puts pressure on your customer as well.
Yeah. We'll talk about creating urgency and how you can do that in a tactful way.
And this isn't to like hate on people who like do launches. Like, there's definitely
Yes, it is.
times and places. Okay.
So, I guess I'll just explain why I said that. I don't love the launch model, like Soren said, because of the urgency that it creates both for you and your customer. I think that there are tactful ways that you can create urgency, and we're going to talk about that in this episode. But the people that are constantly pushing the urgency with the launch model, I think at a certain point, your customers can see through that, especially if you operate from a place of more organic and attraction marketing. People start to see through that. They know that there's always going to be a new launch. There's always going to be a new thing. Whereas if you are evergreen, then when you do have some sort of launch or promotion you're doing, people take it a lot more seriously and it has a lot more oomph to it where people actually want to sign up. You have bigger numbers because people don't know when the next one's going to be because you don't do one every quarter or whatever, like a lot of launch style businesses do. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I'm confused, but that's okay.
Well, people that run a launch style business, like their audience gets used to the fact that like they launch,
But no, that like the whole point of a launch is that you don't know when the next one's going to be.
except your customers get smart. Like if you run a launch style business and you do one every single quarter, you think that people don't like notice that. That's like, oh, she's back to sell something. The other thing that a lot of launch style businesses tend to do is they go dormant in between their launches on their social media. And so they only show up when they want to sell something. It's just a trend that I have noticed. So the very first thing that you need to do in your launch planning is really making sure that you have a good grasp around your audience, not just who your ideal customer is, what they need, right? All the basics that everybody talks about, but what are their symptoms? What are they actively experiencing right now? And you should be able to connect this on an even deeper level because you've had conversations with these people. You've had a social media presence for potentially, 6 months to a year, right? So you've had DMs with people. You know, in their own words, what they're going through. You've gotten applications from people. You know, in their own words, what they're feeling. And so making that connection is a lot simpler and you can really go even deeper into people's current reality with your messaging because you've already had those conversations. You've already done that information.
Well, and it's really funny because like social media and especially like Instagram with the DMs, it really allows you to get an insight into your customers and do market research essentially for free. People will tell you what they want either in the comments or people really open up in the DMs about what they really want if you have a conversation with them.
And that's the thing, if you just talk to people rather than constantly trying to shove your offer at them, you'll get so much valuable information.
Exactly. And that's kind of like the whole point of doing organic marketing.
'Cause you're not constantly just shoving your offer at people. You're actually providing value, but not in this schemy marketing bro way of providing value where you're just dumping things on people, right? It's intentional.
Yeah, you're not standing in front of your Lamborghini.
I can't stand those videos. Oh my gosh.
Well, I also think it's funny because I think they're less popular than they were like 5 years ago.
Oh, for sure. We're all like, we know you rented that Lamborghini. Anyway, so understanding your ideal audience and then beyond like what their symptoms are and what they're going through, which is of course important for any launch, also differentiating your offer and setting specific outcomes within your own business and within your own mind for what your offer is. So how is your offer that you're launching different than your other offers? And not just in terms of support and what they get, but who is this offer for in comparison to who your other offers are for? What gap does does it fill in your offer suite? And if you can't answer that question, maybe it's not an offer that you should be selling. So think about the gap it fills, what it does for your cash flow in your business, what it does for your upsell and downsell structure. Who is this for in terms of who your actual entire offer suite is for? What level are they at? Where does this fall within your offer suite? What's the downsell from this offer? What's the upsell from this offer? You should have that along with essentially an itemized list of what the outcomes of this offer are. What should they be able to have, do, know when they're done with this offer? And again, if you can't clearly articulate those things in conjunction with their current reality, you're going to have a really, really hard time selling.
Well, and here's a really good example of that everyone can relate to. And I actually sent you this picture last week. You can Google this. Google Apple's consumer product quadrant or something along those lines. And what'll pop up, there'll be a couple of different images, but essentially the original one is a quadrant. And on the top, it has consumer, it has pro, and on the side, it has desktop and has mobile. And what you see is you see the iMac Pro, whatever predated the MacBook Air, and essentially the MacBook Pro. Slightly different names. Can't recall them all off the top of my head, but they had it divided up. So each one of those offers served a customer segment. So as Kenda was saying, when you're thinking about how all of your products affect your upsells and your downsells, especially like when you're moving towards a launch with a certain product and, you're driving leads and traffic in there, you can sketch this out yourself. You can use a quadrant, you can use a funnel, you can use a type of a ladder to like orchestrate where your products fit in your product suite and how they apply to the different types of customers you are attracting. And sometimes what's really interesting is you'll do this and essentially what you'll realize one way or another is that you have a gap in what you're offering because you're getting tons of people who want product X, but you only offer Y and Z. And it can tell you, oh, maybe we need to add this into our product suite.
Exactly, which we'll talk about more. We have an episode planned for season 2 that's the evolution of your product suite and creating a profitable product suite. So that's something that we'll dive into more, but that's exactly right. That's something that you need to know going into any launch because if you are just selling an offer to sell an offer, and just because you know kind of what problems it solves, again, that's not deep enough. It needs to be specific as to who that offer is for, again, in comparison to who your other offers are for. For example, within our offer suite, we obviously have the Social Media Millionaire membership. Everyone loves that offer. And so that is for a different type of person, a different level of business owner than what TTI is for or what MCM is for. So again, they all solve different problems, of course, but they're for different types of people, for different levels of business owners. So it's really important to have that understanding within your business, which brings us back to what we kind of started to get into at the beginning, which was creating urgency. Now, this is rooted in psychology, but people often take it and do it the wrong way. So creating urgency taps into what's called loss aversion. And so essentially, people don't want to miss out, right? People don't want to lose out on something. So that's where this creating urgency, that's the psychology behind it. So techniques for creating a sense of urgency and scarcity, those can motivate customers to buy. So that's like the cart closes on this day, right? That's a form of scarcity. There's only 10 spots available. That's a form of scarcity. People that buy within the first 3 days, they're getting a bonus or an upsell. And so that is a sense of urgency where people really promote the exclusivity of their offers where, oh, I only offer 3 of these a quarter, right? That's the scarcity thing. So people obviously are driven towards wanting to buy something that is exclusive, that there isn't a lot of. People want to feel special. And then you pair that, the scarcity, with the fact that they're going to lose out on it, with the urgency that other people are taking those spots, right? We talk a lot about that when we talk about our transparency content and how we actually do this in an ethical way. But the biggest thing that you can do to create urgency in a way that is transparent and honest is, one, having a countdown and then sticking to it. If you say carts are closing, actually close those carts, okay? And although it may not seem like a big deal to like jam a few people in that message you after the fact, it's going to carry over for your next launch, right? So people knowing that you truly are closing that cart, that's going to carry forward into everything else that you do and you holding your word on social media. And so again, there's a lot of these little things that a lot of people slip up on where they'll add an extra person in. They say there's 10 spots, but really there's 20 or there's no limit, right? And so keeping your word and then also showing people that on social media, that doesn't just affect this launch, but it's going to affect every single launch in the future.
Well, and it'll do more than just affect your launches because, I mean, these are lines and rules that you draw in your business. And when you blur the lines, what stops you from replying to clients at 2 a.m.? The list goes on and on. So, being really firm with like lines that you draw in your business, whether it's, for marketing, like promotional launches like this, it really does affect everything else. So when you set lines, you really need to stick to those lines to the best of your ability because it does transfer into other parts of your business and into your life as well.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing that I'll say on that is, how do you actually do this? Because we've obviously talked a lot about what not to do. So, how do you do this in your business in a way that is transparent and is ethical? So, if you're saying that there's 10 spots left, I would like to see those spots actually being filled up. And then I want to see you not necessarily introducing all of those people, because I have also mixed feelings around that where people do that as well. I think you should protect your client's privacy unless they explicitly tell you otherwise. But I want to see you talking about, the 10 different people that are in your offer, and then also continue to talk about that after you've closed the doors, after you're already through with your launch, showcasing the 10 people. The 10 people. Keep saying that over and over again and really hit home to that transparency, to those ethics within your content in a way that's just repetitive so that people see that, they know that about you. Because again, that's going to affect your future launches. When you say there's 10 spots left and you have a track record of actually having 10 spots and actually showcasing that, that's going to really hit home and encourage people to take action. So a lot of these tips actually, of course, you can use them in the moment, but they're also things that are going to translate to the future of your business and the future of your sales and your ability to create urgency within your business, is because you need to have that trust there. If you say that there's only 3 spots available, but no one believes you because you haven't showcased that, because you kind of blend in with everyone else in the industry that says that, that doesn't really do anything for you. But if you have a track record of showcasing that, of being transparent, that's actually going to allow you to use these psychological tactics for your benefit, again, in an ethical way. Another thing around creating urgency, in a really great way that you can do this without having to do the 3 spots left thing, is you can showcase the demand that you have for your offer by showing, screenshots of DMs that you've gotten, screenshots of application notifications, any notifications that you have. And again, transparency content really speaks to pulling back the curtain and showcasing communication between your business and anyone else. So whether that's, like I said, a DM, an application, any sort of notification, a comment, any of that can be leveraged for transparency content because you're showcasing the interaction between your business and your potential customers, your audience, anything like that. And so that's going to showcase the demand of your offers and just really build hype and FOMO. And again, people don't want to miss out when they see other people joining. So that's a really great way that you can create this sense of urgency without having to do the sketchy, spooky industry tactics that we see so many people doing. So the next tip that I have for you, and this will smooth out your sales process significantly, is to anticipate and overcome objections within your content. So before you get into a sales conversation, before you get into the DMs with somebody, before you even get on a call with somebody, you've already overcome a lot of the key objections that people are going to have. So what does that look like? We know that people have objections around pricing. I can't afford it. It's too expensive, etc., etc., etc. So how can you overcome those objections in a public forum? So before someone even applies to work with you, that's already been handled. What about the objection of, I need to think about it? What about they've worked with a previous coach in your space and they feel like they didn't get what they deserve to get out of it, right? All of those things that are super, super common, you can overcome those and you can already have controlled the narrative around that and set the tone for how people interact with you and with your business through your content.
And here's just another little tidbit. When you get an objection that you typically don't get or phrase in a different way, and this is what separates average to mediocre business owners from like the greats, you write that down and you add that into your list of objections. You add it into your repertoire. You train with your sales team and you go over how to overcome those objections. And it will get to the point where where anyone can throw any objection at you for the offers you've been having, and you just handle it. And you'll get to this point very quickly, but very rarely will you ever get an objection, especially after a month or two if you're dealing with like some decent lead flow, like it just slowly dissipates. But if you never write them down, if you never come up with responses, if you never train on how to deploy those responses, you will continue to have objections in your sales process and you will continue to lose sales because of objections.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to prime people, I guess. We talk about priming in a lot of different ways, right? You talk about priming in the pre launch phase, you talk about priming your audience, you talk about nurturing your audience. But I think what's most important is to prime people for the tone and the, I'd say, methodology that you take on within your business. And so not only do you want to prime people in your social media for being ready to buy, for knowing that they have this problem that you can solve, but also priming them in a way that they're prepared and that tone is set for the standard of how you want them to interact with you. So if it's already been made clear in your content, your stance on many of these objections, and you've already handled those within your content, then you're not going to have those same things. Your conversations, instead, when it comes to sales, are going to consist of ensuring that somebody is actually a perfect fit for your program and really getting deeper into what they're needing, what they're going through, creating that relationship between you and your client rather than fumbling around trying to handle objections, because you can get a lot of that out of the way. I would say I've gotten down to, and I don't have concrete statistics, but this is just my feeling based off of the conversations I've had. I think in the very beginning of my business, I would say probably 2 out of 3 conversations would result in me receiving an objection. Now, I already had sales experience, so I was able to overcome a majority of those objections, but I'd say 2 out of 3 conversations, I would get an objection thrown at me. We've gotten to the place in our business where the wheels are turning so well with our marketing, and we've been so strategic in setting the tone with our social media. I'd say maybe 1 in 10 conversations actually I get hit with an objection.
I mean, you're the one in your DMs the most. I wouldn't know.
I'm like estimating maybe 2 in 10, but it's very, very rare. It's very, very rare. Almost all of my conversations in my DMs. Now, that's not to say that our sales team doesn't get objections. That's not to say that we don't ever get these things. But I'm saying with my conversations that I have with people on social media, a good 90% of them are just us building a relationship, chatting about what they need, really diving into what's coming up for them, really discussing how the program can help them, really determining which program is the best fit. It's not objection handling. They're not telling me they can't afford it. They're not telling me any of these other objections that are super, super common in the space. We're just having a conversation and then they're moving through into our sales process. So I definitely can say that with our marketing, I've definitely seen this to be true, where of course it's going to take time, but if you are constantly handling these objections within your marketing in your day to day, again, you've set the tone for how people interact with you. You've already handled the core problems. They're not going to observe and come through that content and then inquire to work with you and then suddenly decide that they have that objection again, right? That's just not going to happen. So it's really, really important that you, again, set the tone with what you expect. What are the standards that you've set for yourself with who you want to work with? What are the standards that you've set for these types of conversations that you're going to have in your DMs? Because if you're coming from a place of fear of having those objections, of being able to handle those things. Oh, am I going to be able to sell this offer at this price? Am I going to be able to get enough interest to sell this group offer and have it be a good cohort, right? If you are coming from a place of those fears with your marketing, you're going to have those objections. Whereas if you handle those types of things right off the bat within your marketing, you're not going to have those problems. So then tip number 4, I want to talk about how to actually effectively leverage social proof within your business and within your launch, because something that I see so often is business owners just blasting people with testimonials, case studies, screenshots, social proof, and they think that they're building trust and credibility. They think that they're just showcasing how great they are, but in reality, when you're constantly blasting out those pieces of social proof, one, you're actually making your audience numb to it, right? You're overpowering them to the point where when you do have a really good testimonial, when you do have a really really good piece of social proof, it's kind of falling on deaf ears because they've already been beaten over the head with your testimonials. And number two, it can come across in a way that is not actually being used to further prop up your authority. It's actually dragging you down in the sense that it comes across like you're trying to prove yourself. Like you're saying, see, look, I really can do this. See, look, I really can produce results. Look, I am good at what I do, right? Rather than using it more sparingly and being more intentional with where you drop it in. It is, I can promise you, 1,000,000 times more effective to drop in one single screenshot or one single piece of social proof along with a story that you're creating that is giving context to a struggle that a lot of your audience has, right? Dropping in one piece of social proof with context around what you did for that client, exponentially more effective than blasting out 15 slides of screenshots and 7 testimonials.
And the thing is, it comes down to storytelling. If you talk about what those results meant to that person, if you talk about the story of how those results were achieved, you're selling a story, which is much different than trying to just sell a screenshot or a bunch of random screenshots.
My personal favorite is when people blast out like 7 back-to-back like video testimonials with like no context. It's just like the person's name. Please stop doing that. I implore you. Because first of all, I'm just tapping through. I'm not watching those. And I would almost say, here's a bold statement for you. I would almost say that it's more effective not to post an entire video testimonial. I would say, again, like Soren said, tell the story, talk about where they started, give the context to what their problems were, how you overcame that. Allow people to, in your audience, to see themselves in that client's testimonial, in that client's story, and then take a little 10 to 15-second soundbite out of that testimonial that really communicates and drives home the point that you're trying to make with your content rather than trying to get people to sit there and watch a 3-minute testimonial because people just simply aren't going to, and then they're not going to get that information that you wanted them to have. So I would almost say don't post the entire testimonial. Take the most important parts and clip those in with your context, with the story that you're telling. And again, use those to drive home your point. Don't try to use those as the story.
Also, keep in mind if you post a slide that has 2,000 words on it, people aren't going to read that on Instagram. They're just not. You have to treat your Instagram slides, you have to treat it like copywriting on a magazine page. Think of Nike ads, just do it, except a little bit longer than that, if you got to. But you get my drift here is if you're not being concise and you're not being quick in what you're saying, people flip through Instagram stories all the time. And if you are going to use slides that do have more text on them, you have to build to those and you have to start with a hook and you have to get people involved in your story to the point where they'll want to read those slides. And if you're doing that, hook, line, and sinker, you're getting them to spend more time on your content. They're going to be more converted to who you are and what you do.
Exactly. And you're just giving them the information that they need rather than blasting them with a bunch of irrelevant details. So here's an example of this. Soren and I were just in Miami. How many ice cream / gelato / cold treat places are there along that one main street by the hotel? Like 1,000,000?
Arguably not enough though.
So we're driving down this one street. There's probably at least 9 different ice cream things within this 2 to 3 block radius that we're driving through.
But there's one that stood out.
There's one that stood out, of course. So every single one, besides this one that I'll share with you guys in a second, every single one had what? They had their flavors written out on their window. They had those little trifold things outside with all their flavors and Italian ice and their logo.
Miami gelato, Italian ice, a million different ways just to say gelato or ice cream.
And they were really cutesy signs and decor, and you could tell that they were trying to really draw you in with the vibe, with the aesthetic, with what they're selling, with their flavors, with this differentiation. You know which one caught our attention?
And had to line out the front door for it.
The super ghetto looking random place on the corner that in great big letters across their window with no other information said, "We have bomb ice cream."
Add one more word in there, but yeah, you get the idea.
That is what caught people's attention. They had their sign that had their logo on it, and then it had that across the window. Again, no flavors, no menu outside, none of the other noise that all of these other places had. And again, let me just emphasize, this was far from the cutest, most aesthetic, Instagram worthy ice cream place on the block. But this one had a line down the street and the others had maybe 1 or 2 people inside. So do with that what you will. Take that into your Instagram stories. Clearly communicate what you have. Don't bore people with words. Don't try to make it so pretty, so aesthetic that you're just people's eyes are glassing over, right? There's so many other options out there. There's so many competitors that do very similar things to you. Now, what do you do better than them and how can you communicate that?
How can you communicate how you differentiate yourself from the competition?
As quick as possible, as painless as possible for your viewer. Because above all else, people try to move away from pain, right? We're very pain adverse. And so when it comes to making a sale, when it comes to consuming content, right? We want to consume things that are easy for us to consume. We want to read Instagram story slides that have large text that clearly draw our attention to a couple different places and then let us move on with our day. That's what I'm going to remember. That's what I'm actually going to see. The people with a million teeny tiny words on their stories, like great big paragraphs, and the people that post 7 different slides of videos, I'm not watching that. I'm tapping through it as fast as I possibly can. And think about how you consume. Think about what you watch on social media. Who are your comfort creators? Who are the people that if you see their story, you're clicking on it no matter what? Think about how they create. Think about what they do. Okay. And I'm not saying to try to replicate what they do. Look for the principles of why it's attractive to you. It's easy to consume. It removes pain. It's clear. It's easy for you, right? That's why you like to consume it. So replicate those principles within your own content and use the testimonials sparingly. Again, don't beat people over the head with the video testimonials and the screenshots. One sprinkled in an intentional way will do 100 times more for you than just blasting out 45 slides of testimonials that people, I can promise you, are not going to read. Okay. This brings us to point number 5, which is the role of emotions in purchase decisions. So this kind of ties in all of the things we've talked about so far and all of the things that we're going to talk about, right? So people are emotional decision makers, right? There's so many stats that tell us that in general, any purchase decision is 80% emotional and only 20% logical. So although we do want to speak to that logic, although we do want to showcase that information, we also need to know and understand how to tap into the emotions, again, in an ethical way, right? Because any of these sales psychology tactics, you can 100%, you can very easily manipulate people.
You can close people who should not be closed.
Exactly. And so you want to take from these psychological principles, but then implement them from a place of integrity. So understanding emotions in purchase decisions, right? How can you do that? Again, just like in your content really easily. You can talk about your own story. You can tap into the emotions that you had, the emotions that you felt that allowed you to have this transformation or before you had the transformation, right? That's a really ethical way that you can tap into that emotion by just showcasing and really driving home what you went through. You are your own best testimonial. And so really being real and raw with the emotions that you had as you were going through this transformation, as you were learning what you needed to learn, as you were reaching the turning point that you share in your personal story on your social media, that's going to be so huge for you to activate the emotions of other people because they're going to see themselves in you, see themselves in your story. And above all else, people want to feel seen and heard in your content. That's the same reason why we say don't just blast people with social proof, give context. Tell a story with the screenshot that you're giving. Because again, we want people to feel seen. If you are showcasing the story of how your client went from point A to point B, and you can really illuminate the emotions that they had at point A, the emotions that they now have at point B, and then bring in the logic. What are the tangible things you did for them to produce that result? What are the shifts that were made? That's how you can really ethically tap into that emotion, is simply by showcasing what you and your clients have gone through. So the next thing, cross-platform traffic, and this is going to be a long one, but the gist of this is we talk about this all the time, but might not be that long, but creating a machine essentially with your content. So there's many different ways that you can deliver this information as a part of your launch.
Hootsuite, Content.io, whatever the European one is.
Of course, repurposing, creating automations, but emails, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest. Those are generally going to be your core marketing streams when you're going into a launch. TikTok and Pinterest for outreach, Instagram and emails for nurturing. So when you create a machine that drives traffic from place to place, that nurtures people as they go through the steps and as they go through these different touch points with you, you're able to be very effective in the conversation that you actually had. So if somebody found you on TikTok, you know kind of where they're coming from because you've been tracking your analytics. You know how many views you've gotten on videos. You know what your big videos were for the week or the month that performed, that trended, and now they're on your Instagram DMing you. You have a general idea where they came from. You also know what's activating them based off of how they got into your DMs. Did they send you a message asking a specific question? Did they DM you the call to action word from a specific Instagram story? Did they click on one of your story polls, right? How did they get into your Instagram? So into your DMs. So you already know what's activating them. You already know what's coming up for them. And so because you've done the priming, you showcase the results that you have, you've already overcome those objections. Your conversations that you're having with them are able to be very intentional and very honest and open with them. And it's just about what they need. It's just about putting them in the program that's best for them. That's what those conversations are, rather than feeling like you're having to shove people into a sale.
Well, and you get the fact of if you can get them from, TikTok or another platform, if you can get them on like Instagram or YouTube, they're going to consume a lot more of your content. And it goes back to all of the other principles we've talked about up until this, where the more content they consume, the more time they spend, the longer that you have to work essentially in their brain and sell them on what you do and why they should choose you and why you do it the best.
Because you want to be at the front of their mind, right? That's something that everyone and their mom that knows anything about marketing will tell you to do. You want to be front of mind. You want to be memorable. And so the best way to be memorable is to be showing up for them on multiple platforms and to have them binging your content. That's what really, really hits home to the information that we gave in some of our previous episodes around how we do content planning, around the psychology behind the general content that we're just putting out day to day, because you've already made bingeable content. You've already done these things. This machine is already running. So when you come into a launch, it's really just about making those connections and driving that urgency within that time period. It's not about trying to go out, find new people, bring them into your space, nurture them, right? You're not going through this whole process. You're just enticing people to act right at that moment. That's all this launch really is, because you've already built this foundation. You already have this machine running for you. It's been running for you for months at this point.
Exactly. And I think that leads us into our next topic,
which is managing stress and anxiety during the launch process. So this is something that I think a lot of people can resonate with, is that, day 1, day 2 of the launch, you're expecting there to be a ton of thunder and commotion and people just chomping at the bit to work with you. And that's not always the case. And that does not mean that your launch is not going to be successful. We know that people are going to take as long as they have to make a decision.
So the trick is to be consistent, as always. If you're consistent through and you give it your all, you're really consistent about showing up on all of your platforms, you have a really good executed strategy, you will most likely, almost definitely, see success in your launch. Not every launch goes as planned, of course. However, you have to realize that these things are done over a time period and that it can take time for your marketing to work. And if it's your first launch, you might not do everything perfectly the first time. If it's your 50th launch, there's things you can still mess up.
There's going to be technical issues. There's going to be problems where your analytics don't get tracked. There's going to be pieces of content that really took off for you months before and they just don't really hit the same way that time, right? That's totally okay. Things are going to happen. And also know that a majority of your sales should actually be happening during either the pre-launch period or those last final hours before your doors close. That's when people are generally going to act.
Again, coming back to the whole urgency point.
If you give people 10 years to do something, they're going to take the whole 10 years. So just keep that in mind. And your worth and your success as a business owner does not ride or die on this one launch. And you know what? I think a really good, and this ties us into our next point, which is learning from failure and also staying motivated. If you kind of adopt the mindset, I guess, I think mindset's like really become a buzzword and is not very helpful for most people. But if you can kind of adopt the perspective where, if you have something go wrong, it's not something that went wrong. It's just a interesting piece of the plot, right? So in the future, when you tell this story, in the future, when you talk about this, when you are creating content, you have another juicy piece of information that you can use to showcase a transformation. So in a lot of ways, something not going right is the juiciest win that you could possibly have because it's something that you can leverage for content. It's something that you can leverage in the future to even further tell your story, relate to your audience, and drive home the fact that everyone has these off periods, everyone has these lulls and these ruts, and it's totally normal. And it's something that you can actually leverage to your benefit in your marketing in the future. So, whenever we take an L for anything, be it, like I said, a tech malfunction, be it a problem client having to fire a team member, anything that happens where we just have to take the L in our business, it's another spicy tidbit for the plot. It's all for the content. That has really helped me manage stress around these launches. If something doesn't go well, great. It's something else for me to talk about on social media. It's something else that I can showcase and teach people about. I love that for me.
The next thing is really working towards setting goals and tracking your progress, which I'm a huge fan of because I love me some good analytics. So I really recommend making sure you know your CRM in and out, whether or not you're using Pipedrive, Salesforce, Monday, you're using an Excel sheet, whatever you're doing, whatever product you're using, know it, have it set up well so you can track these analytics. Make sure you have like the right graphs so you can look at your 4 weeks trailing so you can see what your trends actually are. Look at how many calls are getting booked in, how many leads are being brought into your business on a, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis so you can view those trends. And make sure you can also create graphs that have goals outlined that your entire team can see. That way you guys know how far away or how close you are to hitting your goals. And make sure your goals are also time oriented because as much as we talk about creating urgency with your clients, you need to create urgency with yourself, within your business, and within your team as well. Again, it should not be anxiety inducing urgency, but it should be urgency and like we're moving towards this. Instead of by doing end of week, do by end of day for most things, Give your team less time to accomplish their goals and tasks, and you'll see over time that a goal that might have last year taken you a month to hit, you can get that down to 2 weeks, down to a week because of how you're looking at time, how you're tracking your goals, backwards engineering everything, and creating urgency within your team. And it's not that everyone's working harder, you're just working more efficiently. You're figuring out how to do more in less time, and it will help you accomplish more.
I don't know if you guys can tell through the recording, but let me just tell you what I'm seeing. Soren's brain works so fast, but he struggles sometimes to get words out because his next thought is already happening. The fact that he even paused between thoughts and didn't just do that in one breath was like an insane amount of self-control that he was trying to have.
Yeah, that happens. Not even going to deny it there. So,
Do you have anything else nerdy to share with the class in terms of tracking? I'll just say my one thing is that with clients, something we see a lot is like they track the success of their posts, they track what their views look like, they track how many inquiries they got, but then they don't track their conversion rate.
So I'm a huge fan of like two things. One is just like overall like tracking your sales pipeline. I really like trailing revenue. Like everyone uses Stripe pretty much, and everyone will look at their month to date sales. It's I think the automatic thing that pops up when it loads in.
I think so, month to date.
Although that is good, although that is interesting, although that can be motivating, and it's really good to think of things in months. In some instances, I prefer to look at the 4 weeks trailing, and I prefer to go and I hit year and I hit weekly because those are two things where you can get a much better trend if you're going into a downtrend or an uptrend. And just if you look at it in those terms, one, you have 52 weeks in a year compared to 12 months. So if you mess up 1 week, it's a lot less cash traffic. It's only 2% of your year compared to messing up a month, where it's like essentially 8 point something percent of your essentially, let's just say 10% of your year. And look, even if you do mess up a month or 2 months or 3 months, you can still have a really good year. That's not the point of this. The point of this is the simple fact that if you look at things in weeks instead of months, if you treat a week as a mini month, in a sense.
Is that the official term?
Yes, exactly. I coined it myself. Trademark pending. You have 52 more. You're decreasing your risk because if you look at everything in terms of weeks instead of months, like if you wait till the end of the month and you're like, oh shoot, we undershot our sales goal by 50%. Well, guess what? Now you only have 11 more times to do that this year.
But again, not to stress you out though.
Well, no, the whole point, if you look at it and you're like, oh, we didn't meet our sales goal for this week, let's do it next week. Or we need to make up for this next week. It's a lot more manageable. And it's really more manageable if you're looking at like your quarter. You can fix your quarterly goals in weeks a lot easier than you can in months. You only have 3 months in a quarter. Anyways, it depends how you run your business. It depends how your brain operates. But typically, if you give yourself more opportunities to shoot hoops, you're going to make more hoops. So that's what I really like. Here's my other thing that I like to point out. Your social media views tend to be a leading indicator of what your sales will be in the next 4 to 6, sometimes 8 weeks.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. It's not immediate.
If you have a TikTok go viral and get like 5 million views, you will see it will immediately affect your sales process. But like generally speaking, if you're averaging, let's say, 250,000 views a month on TikTok and it goes down to 100,000 views over the course of a month, you're still going to be doing good sales for the next 4 to 8 weeks. And then you're going to see a sudden drop and then you're going to be confused. So some analytics, they don't match up precisely day to day. They are leading or trailing indicators of other analytics within your business.
Which is why it's important for you to not only know your conversion rate, but the average time span with which it takes someone to go from finding you to actually converting.
And the last one I like to talk about is sales velocity. Know your sales velocity. You can Google up the equation. It's really simple. I'm not going to explain it because unless you can see it, it's just going to confuse you.
Can you just tell the people what sales velocity tells you?
It essentially tells you how much revenue you're selling per day. So if you have like a sales velocity of $3,000, your business is essentially generating revenue at a rate of $3,000 per day. Yeah, it's a like a velocity, so it's like your speed. If you're a physicist listening to this, please don't come for me. I know saying speed and velocity in the same sentence is a no-no, but for all intents and purposes here, just think of it like that.
Okay. Oh my gosh. So basically, to wrap that up and put that back into English for the majority of our listeners, essentially, your social media analytics and your sales analytics are not going to directly match up day by day. Like Soren said, if you have a video go viral, yeah, you'll probably make a lot of sales that day. But what we see,
or get a lot of leads, but
yeah, or get a lot of leads, whatever.
It will typically, in that sense, it will affect you further down the line.
Yes, it'll generally affect you later on.
Because what Kenda was saying earlier in the podcast, it takes people longer to make decisions and make time. And it takes them time to get over onto your Instagram, to watch some of your Instagram stories, to then submit the application, to then sign the deal.
So if you have like a video that gets like 100,000 views, then you're probably not going to see the results, the sales from that, the influx for like probably 2 to 4 weeks. Because if people find you on a larger video, it's going to take them time to actually convert. Also, this episode has been such a good look into what our conversations are like because we both talk at the exact same time, but somehow we come to a conclusion. I love that for us. Anyway, was there anything else we were going to talk about? I wrote down like staying motivated. Motivation's like fake. I was going to give my spiel about that, but I don't really feel like doing that now.
Yeah, just be consistent. Don't be motivated, be consistent. Who cares about motivation?
Be consistent. I was just gonna say there's a difference between motivation and discipline, and motivation won't do anything for you. Discipline is actually what you need. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's all I have for you today. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, preferably a nice one. If you don't like the podcast, put that in your diary, not in our reviews.
And you guys all know someone who needs to hear this podcast. You all have that friend that's starting their business or trying to grow their business. Send this podcast to them. Send this to someone who needs it.
Yeah, share it with them. Also, if you share the podcast on your story and or screenshot and send me a screenshot of the fact that you left a review, I will send you a Starbucks gift card. Soren's eyes got all big.
Edit that part out.
Okay, how about this? If you share the podcast on your story and or send me a screenshot of sharing the podcast on your story and or send me a screenshot of you reviewing the podcast,
you'll get a high five from Kenda in the DMs.
I will enter you to win a free month of the membership. Soren didn't like to Starbucks gift card. What a hater. Anyway, if you want to see some of these tips in action that we shared in the podcast today, I think there were supposed to be 10, but we kind of rambled all over the place. So enjoy. If you want to see them in action, be sure to follow me over on Instagram or on TikTok. And also, I have a YouTube channel. A lot of people don't know that I have a YouTube channel, but I ramble in depth and give some spicy opinions over there as well. So be sure to head over to YouTube as well. If you are someone who listened to this podcast and went, oh my gosh, I don't know how to get an Instagram story that makes me money, or I don't know how to have a video do 5 million views, that's totally fine. That's what we're here for. So it sounds like you might be a candidate for our new program, which is the Social Media Millionaire Content Mastery. So if you want details for that, they are down in the show notes. And you can also DM me on Instagram and we can have a little chit chat about it and see if it would be right for you. As always, thank you for being here and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.